Hello everyone, welcome back to Politics Relax podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the huge news over the weekend that Matt Hancock has resigned as Health Secretary, being replaced with Sajid Javid. I don't actually think there's that much else that we really need to cover, but since it was such a big story here, I think it's been one of the biggest probably over the last few months even. Let's just get straight into it. It was, I thought it was going to be sacked, to be honest. Although I didn't expect Boris Johnson to have that much of a backbone. So,
But for me, I think Hancock was right to resign. I think, to be honest, he should have done it sooner. I can understand that making such a big decision does perhaps take a while to kind of mull over whether it's the right thing to do. But I think the fact that it appeared as though on Friday he was staying fairly resilient and he wasn't planning on resigning by the looks of it. Although it depends on which way you read into his original statement. I think that he waited a little too long, and I think that's reflected badly on the government now. I think in terms of the PM sacking him, I think the responsibility was with Hancock to resign because it was Hancock who was being accused of the hypocrisy, and the reason that was the case was because it was Hancock himself who had made the original statements about, for example, Professor Ferguson saying that he had to resign and being very harsh generally on people who had broken the rules and saying they had to resign. So that would be my explanation for why I believe that it was right that Hancock has to resign. But I think also perhaps could explain why the PM didn't sack him. Now, in the end of the day, we were in the situation now where we don't have Hancock as health secretary. I think that's a good thing because I think his position was untenable. There was no way he could realistically continue to lecture the public about following these regulations for any longer when he himself doesn't follow them. And I believe Sajid Javid, who's replacing him now, is a safe pair of hands. He's run 7 government departments in the past, so he knows how to do it. I was reading quite a few people today on Twitter believing that he hasn't put foot wrong in the past. So I think that that's exactly what we need to ensure that we're coming out of this pandemic in a cautious and irreversible manner.
yeah, Piers.
Well, about the timing of the resignation, these things can sometimes occur to distract from other news events. Obviously, right now there isn't that much going on. The only thing I can think of the travel industry protest in London yesterday. But other than that, I can't really think of anything that I could distract from. But yeah, now we've got Saj in charge. For former minister many times, and in 2019, third place to becoming the Tory leader and prime minister. So he's certainly well known and experienced. So I suppose that's a good thing. More experienced than Hancock was when he first got the role. And it remains to be seen how well he'll do in the role. It's certainly more junior than his role as Chancellor of the Exchequer, but still seeing as the pandemic situation is still going on is quite important. Of course, what did Dominic Cummings say? He said that Javid is Carrie Simmons' old friend, who is of course the tabloid media likes revolving around Carrie Simmons, as does Dominic Cummings, with her influence over the government that can neither be proven or disproven. But I think it's interesting the choice of Sajid in this case, considering how close the two are in that regard. I think there's some merit there to that. That could be a story for another time.
I think him leaving was the honourable choice to make. I think most people, including Conservatives, believe that his position was untenable after him, breaking COVID restrictions. Boris really couldn't sack him though. He knew where the bodies were buried. He knew everything that went on in government, and like Dominic Cummings could ruin Boris's career. But Sajid Javid replacing him, I don't think is the right choice. While he's less incompetent than Hancock, I do believe that he isn't the right fit. He's a banker.
I think Matt Hancock does have a role to play in public life. This has been a very bad mistake in the middle of a pandemic, at the end of a pandemic. And I think the fact is that he couldn't carry on in his role as health secretary because he's been the one who's been preaching to people to follow the rules, and he's now been proven to break the rules. But I think that within the next couple of years, it would be quite right, withstanding the inquiry and whatever that reveals, for him to return to the cabinet in another role. Because I think prior to the pandemic, and in some areas in the pandemic, he has proven himself to be an effective minister. And I think that, therefore, we'll see him again. This is not the end of Matt Hancock. It's the end of Matt Hancock as health secretary in the pandemic, which I think is quite right. But it's not the end of Matt Hancock, and I think that's also quite right.
I'm very pleased that he's gone. I think he should have gone earlier. I mean, I think there's been so many scandals that have built up to this, and actually, this probably isn't the reason he should have gone. But I'm just very happy. Whatever the causation of him leaving, as long as the outcome is him leaving, that is fine for me, because he's grossly incompetent, and he was obviously not fit for the role. He's not competent enough to run a McDonald's branch. No, not even. Therefore, he's definitely not fit to be the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. Well, Sajid Javid is certainly an interesting appointment. I'm gonna withhold my judgment for now. I want to see how he does, because he's held offices before, including Chancellor, and there were no cock-ups, there were no mistakes, nothing blew up in his face as of yet. But that means that he hasn't received that much scrutiny yet. He was quite a quiet minister who got on with his roles without that much, bang. It was just Sajid Javid, right? And I because of this pandemic and because of the size of the role currently, that might change, because he certainly has a harder job right now than he did as Chancellor or anything else. So he's going to be tested, he's going to be stretched, and it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see over the next few weeks and months how he does. And another thing to add is he is quite fond. He's quite tight with his money. He's not going to be one to splash the cash, I don't think. And I think that's what the NHS needs right now, a splash of cash. But I don't know if Sajid Javid will be the one to do that. He's a fan of austerity, and he's at JP Morgan at the minute, which obviously does a bit of private healthcare. So I'm not going to preempt it. I want to see how he does. But there are some things that make me uneasy with him as health secretary.
So I think the one thing that I'd quite like to respond to first is Labour's line in the last couple of days that Sajid Javid is the architect of austerity, unquote. That is what Labour have been reeling out on a number of interviews. Those exact 3 words, and that's not true. For a start, he was elected an MP in the 2010 general election, and he didn't hold a senior cabinet position until 2014. That was 4 years into the government of austerity. He was not the architect of austerity. And yes, I can understand you'd say that he's fiscally responsible. Yeah, it's true. But he's also the Chancellor who brought through the budget that Rishi Sunak actually announced in 2020, but he was the one who designed it. The budget that we've all come to know as the budget that's supposed to end austerity. So, I mean, yes, okay, he's fiscally responsible, but he is a Conservative. That's what you should expect from a Conservative. And look, I think that he is going to be in line with the direction of this government. So I can understand why you'd say that he is a fan of austerity, but you've got to remember that the past governments that he served in have been governments of austerity. So he's just been following the direction. I wouldn't say he's been orchestrating the direction, he's been following it. And the first time he got to orchestrate something, he actually orchestrated the budget that would end austerity. So, and I think now that he's part of a Boris Johnson government who will not pursue austerity, what we'll see is he will follow that direction. And I don't think that you're going to think of him as a fan of austerity in a year's time, but we'll have to wait and see. And I hope he does a good, a competent and sensible job as the health secretary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd call him the architect of austerity, because he didn't design austerity. He wasn't even the first chancellor to enact austerity. However, I think we know that he as you say, you've done a lovely bit of spin work there. You said what I said was he's tight with his money. What you said is he's fiscally responsible. I think there's a slight difference between the two things. I think we have to wait and see, right? There's no point trying to predict what Sajid Javid is going to do. And actually, what Labour said is not they said he was the architect of austerity that weakened the NHS. So not just the architect of austerity. Daniel.
Okay, but hang on, but what's the difference between architect of austerity and architect of austerity that weakened the NHS? They're referring to austerity having weakened the NHS.
There's a slight difference there, in which when he was Chancellor, there was austerity that did weaken the NHS. That's all true.
No, but the first chance he had to end austerity, he did. And he committed to the policies of more nurses and more doctors that are now being delivered by the government.
He didn't end austerity. That doesn't mean he wasn't the architect of austerity that weakened the NHS. Two of them can still exist together.
But he wasn't the architect of the austerity that ended the NHS.
He was a chancellor.
He comes from a time
when austerity that weakened the NHS.
Where they cut.
No, he was not the chancellor during austerity. That's my point. As soon as he became chancellor, he ended austerity. That was his aim.
That's cut.
At the very end of his tenure, they ended austerity. At the very, very end.
Well, he was only in his job for 6 months, so it wasn't a very long tenure. And he almost certainly spent those 6 months working towards the 2020 budget.
True,
that was eventually delivered by Rishi Sunak, and of course he got all the plaudits. But you've got to remember, Rishi Sunak only got the job a couple of days before. All the hard work had been done by Sajid Javid, and that's a budget that's been seen as having ended austerity. So I don't think I necessarily support the narrative that he's the architect of austerity. And those are the exact words that Labour have been using, and I don't think I can recognise that.
Yeah, he's just a little bit stingy. Is probably what I say. Piers.
Well, I think Sajid Javid has to play along with Boris, because I mean he's got a job back, or a senior job back after a year of not being in a ministerial role. So I don't know if this is like a sort of trial basis for him or retrial basis for him, because he is certainly not a Johnson era conservative. He is definitively a Cameron era conservative. He was a Remainer. The majority of his roles were in Cameron and May's administrations, and of course he was fired under the Johnson administration because of Dominic Cummings, and it remains to be seen whether he will be like Hancock and just be a scapegoat. Scapegoat for Boris and any wrongdoing is going on around the NHS, or whether he will try and push back a little bit so as to revert back to the place where we were in 5-10 years ago, which seems to be more desired these days, perhaps rightly so.
Yeah, and I think there are going to be a few key decisions coming up. One of them will, of course, be the July 19th unlocking. And he said the other day, what was it? When it was like his first proper interview, and he said he wants to return to normal as soon as possible. Some people have read into that as he wants to end lockdown earlier than maybe the 19th. But I don't.
He's not going to. He's not going to end. He's not going to end restrictions earlier than the 19th. I was watching Mar this morning, and the nerve tag scientist on Mar said that he believed that 19th of July was a sensible date, that the 5th of July would be out of the question, basically. And I think Sajid Javid is safe. He's not going to be running into something when he knows the evidence that shows it's going to make the country worse. And I think it'll be 19th of July. And I mean, people have read into this quote that he wants to end restrictions as soon as possible. But who doesn't want to be out of restrictions as soon as possible? I want to be out of restrictions. I'm sure everyone in the country does. So let's just see how it goes. And hopefully 19th of July, we can all throw our masks in the bin and have a big party on the streets.
All right, Lawrence Fox. Another key decision Sajid Javid has to make is, does he want to give NHS staff a pay rise and nurses a pay rise? There have been some mutterings behind the scenes of maybe a nurses' strike if they don't get a pay rise. That's what I've been, with my ear to the ground, that's what I've been hearing whispers of. So he might have to deal with something like that, which could reflect badly on him, especially that's why I dislike Hancock so much, is because of the junior doctor strikes, and that's what a lot of people remember Matt Hancock, and that's what a lot of people remember Jeremy Hunt for. Piers.
Obviously, Sajid Javid has a much more fiscal past than Matt Hancock. He will understand the implications of strikes on the NHS, both for money making and patient healing, in terms of the effect it has, and he will hopefully make a more informed decision if it ever has to come to that. Of course, he has the help of Rishi Sunak if he needs it, although I'm sure he's busy with his own endeavors. But I think it's much more likely that he can handle things better than Matt Hancock. He's I think he's a safe choice. I think money and the NHS tie quite well together in terms of ministerial positions. They are very closely intertwined. I mean, I know he was only Home Secretary for 6 months, but Chancellor of the Exchequer. But he does have that fiscal history as well. So I suppose it's just what I've been saying this whole episode, that it's better than Hancock.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I would take Sajid Javid as Health Secretary every single day of the week over Matt Hancock, and hopefully I don't regret that statement. Maybe a few months down the line, I'm sure somebody might pull it out as soon as I probably will attack him. Let's be real here. He's gonna do something that I dislike. He's a Tory at the end of the day. He's a Thatcherite Tory. I'm probably going to dislike him, but he's certainly more competent than Matt Hancock, and that is 100% for sure. And I'd much rather have him than Matt Hancock. And actually, I'd much rather have him than somebody like Nadeem Zahawi as well. And I think he was actually one of the better choices Boris Johnson could have made.
Well, I think to be clear about why he got the job and not someone like Nadeem Zahawi, I think it's because Boris Johnson didn't want to risk full-on cabinet reshuffle right now, and still trying to get through the pandemic. All this kind of shuffling around would just make a bit of a mess. And although I do think Nadeem Zahawi should be rewarded for the work he's done on the vaccine rollout, I think that parachuting Sajid Javid in, who will know what he's doing, is a sensible move, and it means that you don't have to shuffle any other ministers. We know the reshuffle's coming in autumn, which I'm desperately excited for, as I'm sure you are as well. But we will have to wait and see what happens in that. But until then, look, I think Sajid Javid, he's going to do a fine job, I hope. But I will be watching him carefully to scrutinise him. And my view on the pay rise, as I've always said, is that I think government should stick to their original promise last year. I can't remember, what was it, 2.5%?
Yeah, I think it was 2 to 3%. They budgeted this
Yeah,
as well. And
yeah.
I am one thing I am absolutely fuming about it, because they should be giving, like, they are NHS heroes. They're the people that we clapped for in the first lockdown, and they should be rewarded at least of what the government had budgeted. If not, I think more, but I'm sure Cameron's going to say it's not fiscally responsible. Rishi Sunak's going to say it's not fiscally responsible. But of course we have to be.
No. I've always said that the 2 to 3% seems reasonable and within kind of fiscal responsibility, if you like, and that's what they budgeted for. But I think any more than that, perhaps when you're coming out of the pandemic, doesn't seem fair. If you put it into context of all the other workers we've got up and down the country.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I want more is because actually during the cuts, NHS salaries have, like, during the last 10 years of Tory rule, NHS salaries have been going down actually compared to what do you call it? Flipping GDP, not GDP.
GDP.
Yeah, GDP, whatever. That was a mess. Anything else? Yeah, I mean, we can look. Actually, I have a very exciting announcement. You have to look out for on the 7th of July. We're going to be bringing in a lot of new things, and it's going to be 1 year since our first ever episode. So check out our Instagrams, our Twitter. It'll probably be on YouTube as well. Whatever. We're going to be announcing something quite big. So I hope you're excited for that. And then there's Michael Crick, which will be kind of be part of that announcement. So please do stick around for that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to everyone for coming on. Please do like the video and subscribe, which I hate saying all the time, but yeah, thank you.